the human creativity and the human contribution in all its forms is critical. So actually all the time. And I think that the organizations are much more about, mutual models of how do we all contribute to a really clear where we're headed, and then how do we share the value around that. So I'm in a shared value model, whether it's internally with employees or externally, because I'm also a massive fan of partnerships.
Welcome to Future Fit Leadership, a podcast for emerging, experienced and executive leaders to build community, grow capability and future focus their career pathways. There has been a global shift in how we lead, and our conversations with leaders and executives explores the skills, strategies and mindsets that is needed to thrive in this ever-evolving landscape of the future. So whether you are a seasoned executive, an aspiring leader, or simply curious about the future of leadership, we are here to give you practical insights to unlock your potential, change the status quo, and break open our assumptions on how work works. Produced in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives, Future Fit Leadership is your place for bite-sized learning for executives hungry to make a change. Hello and welcome to Future Fit Leadership. I hope wherever you are listening to this podcast, you are well. When you meet Monica Bradley, you're struck by two things straight away. Her energy feels like it could light up a room, and her ideas are the kind that stick in your head long after the conversation is over. She has spent her career weaving through industries as diverse as trade, logistics, government, technology, and impact investing. But what ties it all together is her refusal to accept that growth has to come at the cost of our people or the planet. Monica grew up in Queensland in a big, boisterous family with 7 brothers and 71 cousins. Her mum was an entrepreneur who later became a social entrepreneur, always asking how to make the world better. Her dad filled their backyard with fruit and vegetables and taught her the rhythms of nature. Around their dinner table, there were no kids and adults separated. Only a table where archbishops, unionists and refugees could all turn up for a meal. It was here she learned 2 values that have guided her ever since: curiosity and contribution. At 13, when her dad passed away suddenly, Monica discovered resilience the hardest way possible. She calls it her why not button. Say yes to Wall Street at 23? Why not? Take on complex and chaotic environments? Why not? That resilience has fueled her through a global career, and she now describes herself as a specialist generalist, someone who thrives in uncertainty, loves messy problems, and knows that leadership is always a team sport. One of Monica's most powerful philosophies is what she calls a growth without compromise. It's the belief that every dollar of growth should not only make a company stronger, but also regenerate our environment and expand social good. She challenges us to rethink the economic models that ignored the invisible labour of carers, and she insists that boards must move beyond marketing spin to genuinely embed sustainability and social value into decision making. She's also unashamedly optimistic about the next generation. She runs open office hours for millennials and says their purposeful questions and values-driven approach give her huge hope. And when she's asked about what kind of leaders the future will need the most, her answer is simple: curious, creative, and kind. Because kindness, she says, is the secret sauce that makes people want to come together and create change. This conversation is a reminder that leadership is not about having the instant answers. It's about suspending judgment long enough to listen and design better solutions. Monica Bradley is a voice for possibility, for re-architecting business and society in ways that are both ambitious and deeply human. Please enjoy this amazing conversation. Hello, Monica. Welcome to Future Fit Leadership. How are you today?
I am fantastic. I'm optimistic for our country, and I love new beginnings. And I think the day after elections are always new beginnings for our country.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was very optimistic on Saturday night as well. I don't like getting into politics, but I felt very positive and optimistic on Saturday night. And I think I just mentioned today to someone that regardless of what happens in the rest of the world, I think in Australia, we can show the rest of the world of how elections are done, and lose, win or draw, how you get on with it the next day.
Oh, 100%. I'm writing a Substack piece at the moment. It's called the Nah election. Because I think
Love it.
we looked to other parts of the world that have gone a pathway, and we just said, nah, that's not
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud. I'm so
Me
proud.
too.
And we've got great people, and everyone stood up and showed their best selves on
Yeah.
Saturday night. And I was
Yeah.
so proud of the whole lot. And I'm
Yeah.
just proud to be Australian today. So
Yeah.
let's get on with it.
Let's get on with it. Look, you've had an amazing career, an incredible career, which we're going to talk about today. But I want to start, I guess, back to the early days. I'm a big believer that quite often the experiences that you have in life, or, you know, when you first enter business, really shapes you to become the leader that you have. So maybe could you share with us, what are some of those experiences or values or challenges that you had early in your life that shaped you to be the leader you are today?
Well, I'm the perfect melding of the DNA of my mum and my dad. My mother was an entrepreneur. She came from an entrepreneurial family. She never lived in a house. They built and then they owned and they operated hotels all throughout regional Queensland. She then married my dad, who was a customs officer, but had done a lot of sport, but loved the environment. So I was brought up in a household where mum was always out being the social entrepreneur. So she turned from being commercially entrepreneurial to being socially entrepreneurial, so solving for problems in the community. And my dad was always taking us into nature and helping us understand nature, whether it be in our backyard where he produced most of the fruit and veg that we ate. I'm one of 8 children. I have 7 brothers.
Wow.
I have 71 first cousins. We're a big clan. And, you know, the meld of that, we were always asked to be curious and asked to contribute. So we never in our life do I remember having a kids' table and a parents' table. We just had a table and we just broke bread. And my mum's curiosity about how to make the world better meant that you would come home from school and there'd be an archbishop or a unionist or refugees or someone needing help in the community sitting in the table. And it was quite normal for me that, you know, your extended family became part of, you know, you give what you can and you ask for what you need. So
What two wonderful values, being curious and being able to contribute, to grow up with, and then bring that into the business world for yourself. Just amazing.
yeah. And then I think the other element, which has been, you know, all my life, I've had an automatic why not button. And people often ask me, weren't you afraid that would fail? You know, when someone asks you to do something that, in hindsight, when I look back, probably looked ambitious. You know, at 23, someone asks you to go and work on Wall Street, and you go, yeah, why not? And I actually, now that I've had a lot of therapy, I actually think it's to do with my dad passed away really suddenly when I was 13. And I think at 13, I decided when the worst thing that you could ever imagine in your life happens to you and you survive it, it actually creates a resilience inside you. Not that I would ever ask people to do that. There's lots of better ways to develop resilience, but you know, one of the unintended consequences of, you know, trauma in your very early life is that it really builds a resilience. And I've been the beneficiary of that. And I call that my dad's fire. It's like, you know, he lives on through the legacy that we're all living. And I've been blessed to have that. And since my mum passed, I also have her fire. So, man, am I on fire.
Are you on fire? Thank you for sharing that with us. They both sound like incredible people. Now, you've built a global career across many industries. So you've done trade, logistics, government, technology, and impact investing. That's a lot, and across very, very diverse and broad. What's the thread of purpose or ambition that has stayed constant throughout all of those very diverse industries?
Yeah, I'm your classic specialist generalist because I'm curious and I see no boundaries. The idea of being sector specific and going deep never appealed to me. I didn't know that consciously as I built a career. I feel like I'm an accidental executive. I literally I ask questions, I'm curious all my life. And that has always put me into an arena of change, of being part of a discussion. I showed an interest. I have a wit and an intellect that's, you know, I'm very blessed with capability as well. I think the commonality was I'm most often hired by companies that have an ambition to be better, but an ambition to be different, and that they're in a time of change and growth of all of those things. So, you know, I'm your classic clean up aisle 3 girl. When I was 14 and I was working, you know, you go in, when it was going to pieces, something had gone wrong, you get in and very instinctively knew how to work our way through it and bring the people along, make sure the customers were happy, we could move on. So I'm really comfortable
Mm.
in either chaotic, complex, changing, uncertain environments.
Which we are in right now in many ways. So
Correct.
this is your jam in where we're
100%.
operating right now, right?
So actually, the ultimate irony is after that beautiful broad career that took me curiously through these most remarkable series of events and contributions, I find in this sort of last couple of decades of my career really focusing.
Mm.
Like now I'm focused. I am focused on a 10-year window to drive this growth without compromise agenda where every organization, I don't even call them companies, because I think we're evolving past these legal structures to a world where organizations are there to make contribution socially, economically, and environmentally in equal ways. And we are architecturing them by design.
So tell me how, like, we've just talked about how uncertain our environments are, and particularly in leadership, we're kind of rewriting how we do leadership. It's a whole new book that we're writing, and we're doing it and writing at the same time. What do you think separates leaders who thrive in uncertainty versus those who struggle?
Yeah, I think it has to start with your internal journey.
Mm.
I've been a student of myself my entire life. And so I'm often seeking awareness, feedback. Who am I? Where am I going? What motivates me for those? Why am I afraid, excited in different situations? And I think that student of yourself leaves you to a place in now the blessing of my later career, I'm trying to help millennials understand this, where I've actually done my work. I am genuinely concerned about what is the best interest of this organization. And I can do that without boundaries because I can step out of what would have been the 20-year-old ego that said, oh, if I don't try that because I might fail, or what will people think, or gee, that's a bit out of the line, or, that puts me into a competition space. I don't have all those what if doubts in my head. Not as I still have risks and I manage risks really well. I'm very aware of those and I'm aware of the opportunity, but I'm not bringing my personal reputation into it. I bring the ambition for that company into the center. Therefore, you can let go of a lot of things because you're not running on fear. You're running on much more. Then you can get over that. And then you can really use your curiosity to drive deeply into leveraging the relationships you have with a diverse round of people to really get genuine input and bring coalitions of people together. I think this idea that leadership is this kind of going into battle analogy that, dates back centuries, where the leader is the strongest person out the front. Leadership is such a team sport, and I am such a we, not a me. And we don't need the accolades of being that person. And in fact, I'm often, people often say to me, you should be better at taking compliments. And I said, I just feel really uncomfortable because nothing I ever achieve is really just me, right?
Yeah.
I might be the catalyst, but it's always a team effort.
It's a team of people behind you. Tell me, do you think leaders who thrive in uncertain times are also better at taking risk?
I think the real thing is if you can step aside from your internal dialogue and you can genuinely hand yourself over to what is the problem I'm solving, what are the basics, what are the known, what are the unknowns, you get a calmness that comes across you. And then if you can engage with people in a calm manner rather than a frantic, chaotic, urgency kind of matter. That's not to say there aren't things that don't have to happen urgently, but we don't need to do them chaotically. We can do them in a measured way. Then I think we step into a much better process because we're open to feedback. I'm not closed mind to say, well, none of that part could be the solution. I'm totally open. And I'm also open to where the solutions might come from. Like I'm a massive fan of millennials. Oh my God, I love them because they don't have to unlearn. Anyone of my vintage, or older, the biggest job we've got to do in the new economy is unlearn facts, figures, and trends that were put into our head that served us so well through our 20s and our 30s, but now in our 40s and our 50s are failing us because the dynamics and the metrics of the world have changed so profoundly. And that's a hard thing to do because so much of your confidence is built on your success and your capability and your ability to act predictably and successfully in a particular situation. And to now think you have to put those things aside and be able to take counsel from very different groups of people that might be younger, older, different, outside of your spectrum of information.
So you coined the mantra growth without compromise. How did you develop that philosophy and why is it so critical today?
Because I looked back, I read a book, let me share, one of my favorite books.
Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner? I haven't read
Correct.
that one.
Okay. So it's by a wonderful French Canadian, Catriel Marchel. She's a comedian, but she's also an economist. And she went back, in the women's movement, we're trying to always find the origin story of how do I help women become visible and then valued, right, in any capacity that they currently sit in. And it's constant dilemma. Ironically, visible and valued are two V's, and when you put them together, they become a W, which is quite hilarious. So she actually researched Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, arguably one of the authors of the modern economic theory that we use today to measure GDP, which is our kind of success mantra for first world countries. And what she discovered was Adam Smith's mother cooked his dinner and ran his house. So arguably, he would not have been able to come up with that economic theory without the assistance of the unpaid woman in his life that enabled him to do that success. And at that time, he made some critical decisions. Ironically, whilst having your mother look after you, he also chose not to include any unpaid contribution to society in the economic models. And that was kind of the branch of the tree that then has expanded out to the situation we find ourselves in today, where we have this dichotomy about, we really love that care economy, but we don't pay people very well. Well, because somewhere deep in our psyche, centuries of DNA have told us that's not a contribution to GDP because that's unpaid, which it formerly was unpaid.
Imagine how different it would have been if he had actually included it.
Correct. And it's about, and I don't call it about monetary, it's about value, and we have to recognize the value that enables our society to work. And that value comes from a host of different things. And what I'm really ambitious and excited about is redefining these models of what we define a value in our new society. And that's why growth without compromise is, if we're going to grow, I want to make sure with every additional dollar that organization makes, that they are making the environment better, not just net zero, but actually regenerative by design. And they're doing more and more social good with every progression we take forward, making the company better. And then, which is the ultimate impact investment, we're investing in things that when we double down and allocate more capital, more investment to it, the world gets better with every dollar we own. And I just can't imagine a world where the argument to that is, oh no, we'd much rather make more money and have people not be good.
Yeah, but that is partly the argument, isn't it? We'd rather make more money because it's not happening as fast as we would like to. When we talk about things like net zero, inclusion, impact of, carbon footprint, etc. Where do you think boards and leaders get stuck when they're trying to integrate these as ambitions for the business?
Yeah. So number one is it has to move out of the marketing department and genuinely move to the board table. Right. And I mean, it's not with pretty photos from the social impact so that we can put them in the annual report. What's our net zero table that we get from, the people in the marketing department that have hired that outside company to measure our footprint, right? I think the companies that are doing this best have brought it into the boardroom 2-3 years ago and are genuinely educating themselves upwards, right? And are really understanding the full impact of this. Because planetary boundaries, I think a decade ago, we kind of thought were an optional extra. We now understand that planetary boundaries will economically start to impact us and are already impacting us through insurance costs, how affordable or unaffordable it is, which parts of the world can we actually build and construct infrastructure on that would be useful for our society. So all of those things are now having an economic impact, but because our decision-making model got truncated somewhere through this, mass double down on the industrial age model of Milton Friedman, where we only looked at optimization of profit and thought, well, the trickle down will happen. If the shareholders in the business do well, then they will contribute to society and that'll do fine. The planet is free because air's free, water's free. Then we started to put a price on, well, certainly water. And then people sort of started to understand that water had a value, but, clean air, we're still thinking is a free thing, right? So part of that for me is about really, it's a mindset you have to walk into. And, I've been on boards where I'm the only person that kind of thinks in that regard, and it's hard work because people go, yes, but, we can't get a downgrade on our profits. And I say, that's why it's growth without compromise, because we've just got to dig deeper and design better. We can't set, rinse, repeat, use the model from last year that worked and just add to it. This is the ultimate in starting with a zero baseline accounting, but it's just accounting. It's bringing more parties to the table. And it's the other thing which we used to do in my grandma's age is think in longer cycles. Our beautiful First Nations people all around the world teach us 7 generations. And they do that not because it's some philosophical, fabled storytelling mechanism. It's because if you're thinking that far ahead, you're making the best decisions for the now and the next. We've only made, in some cases, the best decision for the next quarter.
It's interesting you say that because, and I know you're bringing large business experience to the table, but small businesses need to start thinking like that too, don't they? Because I think sometimes, we kind of go, that's the big business domain and I don't have to worry about that. They'll take care of, net zero, and they'll take care of diversity and inclusion, and they'll take care of all the different mindsets and the impact economy and low carbon, and, we can go on and on. But it actually starts with a small business.
Well, the beauty is it starts everywhere. It starts in our households. It's an endemic set. And this is the beauty, as my beautiful farewell to the boomers starts to occur at a greater rate. The boomers gave us a lot of things, right? They set our economy up in so many ways and modernized things that have really improved the standard of living. But as the boomers leave, this is where my ultimate confidence in the millennials and the Gen Xers is really good, because you know what? They won't build a business that is built around because in the boomers, our success and reputation for boomers was so tied to these make money, right? Because the idea was, the philanthropy model. I make money and then I become wealthy and I look after myself and I look after my family. Then I have money to share with charities and with people that are less fortunate than themselves. But what people didn't grasp was 2 generations forward, those organizations that built that wealth actually could have done the job so I don't have to actually give so much money to philanthropy. And I see this even in charities. I did a piece of work for a big charity that has a lot of charity shops around Australia, maybe the largest ever. They're a faith-based organization. And I was speaking with their executive council. And I said, tell me how your business model works. And they said, oh, well, people donate, households donate all these, usable, sellable items they no longer need. And then we get volunteers into the store, and then they set up the stores, and then they run the stores, and then we make money. And then we give that money to people that can't pay their electricity bill or, to get clothes. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Why wouldn't you just hire the people who can't pay their electricity bill to work in your store?
Yeah, 100%. At least that way.
Oh my God, then I wouldn't have $200 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And in no discussion was there ever an aha moment that, oh, wow, maybe we could distribute this value in a different way that maybe had a little bit more dignity than me having to turn up, heaven forbid, if I can't pay my electricity bill or can't feed my kids, where I've got to turn up in a way that's personally really shameful to come and ask for help, when maybe those organizations that are designed to help me could have brought me into the circle and given me dignity in the process.
With all the work that you do and the boards that you sit on and the businesses that you're involved in, what gives you the most hope about the next generation of leaders and entrepreneurs that you are seeing at the moment?
Every millennial I meet, I do an office hours, 2 hours twice a week, where anyone can jump in my DMs and book up a calendar appointment and just ask me anything. And the quality of the questions that millennials increasingly just turn up with. And these are really clever, talented metronomics, deep engineering students. And they're really the ambition and the awareness to use those skills to make our world a better place is palpable. Now, maybe I'm not a fair distribution, because there might be a lot of others that are not turning up at my door, but I think there's sufficient numbers of purpose is really at the core of what they're trying to achieve. And maybe that's because we gave our kids a lot of stuff, right? So they haven't felt that, in a lot of cases, we're very in the privileged households that, I've been able to grow up in, we didn't have that, ultimate necessity of, getting food on the table. Then, maybe we had the luxury of being able to develop these things. But I just see what drives them is so different to what drove. I think it was almost the boomers and those early generations were really driven by succeeding at a personal level that then translated into these symbols of power like wealth and prestige in terms of the role that you had. I'm seeing much less of that in the next generation, which means that flat structures, distributed models. You know, I often think the world is like my grandmother plus technology. Because my
Tell
grandmother,
me more about that.
well, my grandmother, you know, lived in a sort of outer fringe kind of, it would have been a country town back then, but now it's an outer fringe in Brisbane. But she had like a 1/4 acre block, but every ounce of that was food and, you know, and protein production. We had chooks, and nothing got wasted through that house. So it was the ultimate in the circular economy, right? Where now all these great theories, you know, Ellen MacArthur is helping us get circular again by design. But, you know, we were circular already. You know, and that was taught by the lesson of the of the Great Depression. And then my grandfather would sit there and tinker on the veranda of his old Queenslander. And he was a cranky, funny fellow. He always had the cricket or something on the radio in the background. And he would mend things. So he fixed radios, bicycles, toasters, things that today are part of our throwaway society. And that throwaway of make, churn, burn, is what then clutters up our environment. And also these artisan skills of building to last. So what the technology does for us now, it enables us to do that design, disassemble, keep using, use our rare materials in a much more efficient manner. And you know, we need to think of that model for skills as well. You know, I'm watching, my millennial friends are teaching me this term, which, you know, future leadership probably understands greatly, but I was a bit of a Luddite on it. The slasher. I'm a slasher.
What does that mean?
Well, apparently the slash is that
Oh,
link
yes,
between the roles that you have. So
yeah,
I'm an advocate, a podcaster, you know,
yes.
a cyclist, a basketball player. You know, I'm not an engineer. You know, like, so the millennials often define themselves by the slash. Some of that is by design. You know, I'm meeting kids that can't get full time or have got to do a side hustle in order to try and save for a mortgage, or, you know, afford living costs in busy, expensive cities where things are happening that they want to be part of, or to fund a passion project in the music or, you know, in the arts that, you know, really gives them a lot of fulfillment. So the slashes. I think the portfolio by design, so how we value contribution and how do we use all these great technology tools like AI to move around the things, to automate the things that are unimportant but necessities, and then really allow us the time and the luxury of focus on deep problem solving, on deep connection to humans.
I want to move into the digital conversation, because you've led transformation across 5 continents. What's the fastest way to surface hidden bias in digital transformation before it hard codes into the tech stack?
Yeah, you've got to have the why right at the very, very beginning. Like, why are we embarking on this change? And whether that's digital or whether that's a restructure, all of these elements are absolutely necessary. But what I see the most common failure I see is it's something we do to people in our organization or to our supply chain rather than doing with. So it's the to and the with discussion. And, you know, I'm not saying everything's fantasy land where you've got, you know, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of employees that everyone can have a say, but good communicators can communicate in really effective ways as to why are we making that, you know, why are we looking for automation and digitization opportunities? We're looking for them. You know what I find now is AI, while it is, yes, a productivity uplift, but it's also about enriching job functions.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You know, how many people our age say, oh, thank God, I've realized I'm such a better editor than I am an author. You know, and embracing the tools that exist for us today so that we can actually really make a higher quality contribution with a shorter period of time by using those tools. And so for me, it's about helping people feel like they have agency in the change and they really understand why. They might always still not accept it, but they at least know what our ambition is. And our ambition is not a sole ambition, because when you don't fill that void with a why, people fill that void with their own ideas. And then it becomes, oh, it's a pet project of the boss, or they're just wanting to make more money. They still don't want to pay us the right amount of money. I'm still working too hard. I've got too much on my plate. So, you know, it becomes, I'm not a recruiter, but it's that idea of you've got to have a baseline of attributes for an organization that means people will want to come and work for you. But some of those things, if you have more of them, they don't make people want to work for you more, right? I forget, there's a beautiful word for it that I'm sure someone at Future Leadership would help me understand in a heartbeat. But they were like the factors that if under that it would cause you wouldn't go, but above that, doing more of it doesn't help you. Yeah, so for me, it's about definitely find a why. be a good communicator and hear it from the top. You don't appoint someone to appoint someone to appoint someone that then does the comm strategy for the change project with or to the stakeholders, right? And how do you help people, even in those projects, get a little bit of agency to themselves? Who would like to come on this journey, and think about, organizations, very large organizations, are mass reflections of where's the informal influence, and how do I bring some of those influences in and help them help me to understand how we do this better.
And what roles can boards play around this, particularly when you've got CFOs wanting to make, cuts because they're driven by profit on the bottom line, et cetera, or investments, and go either way? How can a board play a role around this in business?
I think having closer eyes on how are the comms working in this business? How do we speak? How do we genuinely communicate well with our groups? And, in a lot of the organizations I'm on, I turn up in those businesses when we're going to do these changes. Because, I think one of the biggest issues we often set ourselves up for in organizations is the board becomes this nebulous entity that becomes we have to do that. The board wants that, right? And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not true.
It's not true.
Right? So the board is kind of this, often, not always, but, in some organizations, the board is that faceless people that make decisions that negatively impact my workforce, and it's easier to do that. I would, in those cases, in tough times when we've got to let people go, or, I've been that board director that had to put a company into receivership or liquidation. I mean, these are terribly hard. There is no way through the center of these except through the center, and to genuinely have open conversations about how it is. But I turn up. I think part of it is turning up and standing alongside and offering what you can. We still have to close the company, but how can we help you? I have a network. Every other board director will have a network of people. How do I quietly reach out and say, look, I've got some really talented people here. I'd like to support them. Even if I'm doing, and I like, sometimes I've done that publicly on LinkedIn as well, because again, it gets back to that idea of which part of really being able to build a bridge. And maybe it's just that I'm postmenopausal, to be fair. And I'm in that kind of, I wouldn't say I don't care what people think, but I'm much more driven by getting a better outcome than I am about about going online and saying, I'm the chair of a board and we've had to put this in, but there's some great talent here. And anyone in my network that's looking for these sorts of skill sets, please reach out. And it does two things. One is it actually does genuinely, people are attracted to that, and they are trying to help me, but they're helping them. But the employees that are being let go, when they read that, they have value. Know they're valuable, and someone is publicly saying they have value, because in these adverse situations it's so easy to spiral into a lack of confidence, and it was me and I'm part of that. So I think turning up is super important.
On the flip side of all of that, you've helped many businesses scale. You've managed P&Ls of 200 million plus and sales teams to 500 million plus. When we talk about scaling a business, you need to scale the leader with the business. What have you seen are some of the capabilities that are the easiest to scale in a leader, and what are some of the hardest to scale in a leader?
Definitely the financial number crunching, easy. Machine can do it. I mean, no disrespect. Love CFOs to death. Love good numerate people, but a machine can do that. The hardest one is, ironically, and as someone who also invests in companies, I sit on a lot of investment panels where we're allocating capital from investment clients into them, is you spend maybe 6 months luring the talent that thinks you're too small for them into your business. When you grow at scale, 6 months later, you're actually convincing that person that you've got to bring someone in above them. So it's actually a circular. You're attracting the talent that's a step ahead of the business. And they're saying, looks, it's growing. Yeah, I can see you've got a good brand, but, how will I benefit? And you're often asking them to work for less money, take some risk in the business, become a part owner through share owning equity. They come in, they do a great job. They do their job. But then you actually very quickly, maybe within a year, have actually need the next layer, because now we're going international, or we're widening our reflections. And what we're looking for there is people that have had that experience before, so that we don't have to learn by doing. We're not learning by bringing in hordes of consultants that can help us do it. And it's enticing people on. And my proudest moments are those moments where that person that was the CEO that then becomes, the country manager, and we put an international CEO in, continues to thrive. And the business grows, and they're happy, and the teams are happy because they're on board with the journey. And it becomes less about the egoic role of my career. It becomes the we. What are we here to achieve? How are we going?
Businesses quite often have the option to buy or build talent. So buy that exec or build that exec. When is talent acquisition, so I'm buying it, becoming a trap in your experience? And when is it only the most sane move that you can make?
I think the problem that you buy in is you buy in not only the good, you buy in the narrative and the history. So if that person has worked on, the CV looks great, but what sort of culture have they worked in? As much as we can psychometrically test people, you can't test for, that core character of under pressure. The question I often ask in interviews is not the tell me about what are you good at, what are you not so good at. It's under pressure, tell me what changes in your approach to work or personality. Because it's a really hard question. And I often open it by saying, why don't I share with you what mine is? Under pressure, I become much more direct in my communication style. Some of the flowery stuff that's really useful when we've got the time and the patience to really build powerful, thoughtful words become less. I speak in shorter, more direct sentences. And there's potentially an immediacy with the results and the answers that I would like. Whereas often in a less pressure-packed moment, I might be more tolerant with the time frame that people might need to really get their handle around what we're asking for and move forward. And then they sort of sit back and go, oh, okay. I said, so tell me when you're really under pressure, what changes for you? And they'll go, oh yeah, well, I go really quiet. I say nothing. I find it hard to articulate. And then you're having a real conversation. And they're the people you hire, the people that can actually tell you what they're like. First of all, they've got an awareness of what they're like under pressure, because we've always got that, right? It doesn't go away. And pressure is it's constant now in a lot of cases. But also I'm trying to hire for people that will be able to, by design, hire and distribute value and work effort and productivity so that we're not constantly working in this stress, burn, churn. Yeah. So that's definitely what I look for in the buying in. I think you're buying the history, and you could be buying mindsets and habits that don't equate. And that takes a lot of time. You might have a technical expertise that's fantastic, but that is often something in a growing business you just don't have the time for. What's the opposite of that? When do I build it?
When you build it.
I'm constantly building. I think humans are the difference. Eventually, so much of our workplace will be automated or assistance through, robotics, and that actually the human creativity and the human contribution in all its forms is critical. So actually all the time. And I think that the organizations are much more about, mutual models of how do we all contribute to a really clear where we're headed, and then how do we share the value around that. So I'm in a shared value model, whether it's internally with employees or externally, because I'm also a massive fan of partnerships. I think strategic partnerships are the growth strategy. It is the new black dress, right? I watched even 5 years ago when we were investing, deploying venture capital into growth companies where the US was their target market. And, nearly everyone would say, oh, yeah, we better go and hire a gun. We better spend $400,000 a year hiring that gun American, business development manager that's going to light up and get all the customers acquired in the US. And that was the rule book, right? And everyone follows these same rule books, right? I'm now sitting in those discussions going, I can introduce you to 3 of the best distributors of this software product in the world.
Yeah.
We need to persuade them that we want to be in their roster.
Yeah.
So it's not about this massive investment and risk model of putting a team on the ground in America. Look, sometimes that's still appropriate, but I've watched much more successful companies find strategic partnerships and really genuinely just craft a value sharing proposition that's attractive so that you can make that happen. But then what you've done is you've taken a massive amount of risk out of the business.
So Monica, we've come to the time of the podcast where we ask you our 4 questions that we ask every guest. Right. So I'll start off with, and this will be interesting to see what you have to say given the conversation that we've just had with you today. If you had to describe a future fit leader in just 3 words, which is the kind of leader we'll need most in the years ahead, what would they be and why?
They'd be curious, they'd be creative, and they'd be kind.
And why?
Because I think kindness is the secret sauce. I think people that can be kind, endear, create an additional layer of motivation and energy and a willingness for people to come together around a cause, that will be when people have got a choice, we'll use that. Creativity, because the problems ahead we cannot solve with the learning that we had before that. So what was my third one?
Curiosity.
Oh,
Curiosity.
well, again, it really creativity and curiosity are the same, because you've got to be curious about how might we. I did something recently about the building industry, and they said, is there a catchphrase you use? And I said, yeah, at the board table, I'm forever saying, how might we? It's kind of like just a phrase I use a lot now, because what I'm asking is not, is it possible? I'm just saying, how might we create
I like
a business
that phrase. I might steal that one from you.
Oh,
might we?
Please, open source.
What's one future shift coming in the next few years that you think most leaders are underestimating or not prepared for?
Well, I mean, the go-to everyone would use would be AI.
Yeah.
I think it's the collaborative model. And I think it's how we form. And we're seeing that, everyone's going back to national borders, and we're almost having a little bit of a mini global, let's be made in Australia. So I think what we're trying to do here with this shift is the ability to really be influencers, advocates, and coalition builders. And I think that trend is the antidote to the isolationism and the meanness. And I think Australia's real trump card is our ability to build friendships. We are the friendly nation, and friendship is our superpower. We're known around the world to be those kind, thoughtful, funny, engaging, clever people. And long may that live. And I think that will serve us well in a time where everyone else is trying to isolate and trying to pull back from globalization into isolation. And we're seeing that even in our companies. I think the millennials will move. I think we're working in a scarcity world. And whether that be on a military front, everyone's thinking that there's not enough, and therefore we've got to fight for our bit of whatever that is. I actually believe when we use this, the power of and, or whether we use growth without compromise, these are abundance models that actually we can fix this nature thing. I'm still confident. The regenerative movement is now as sophisticated as what we're doing in robotics or science or space. So our nature systems can help us repair, but we've got to get out of their way, and we've got to rethink those models in a different way. So I think the things that are going to come back to us, I think we're going to need the specialists, but we need these powerful, thoughtful, evolved, really committed leaders that can lead, that are generalist specialists. Because all of those ways we divided the world up in the mechanistic world, it's all gone.
What do you wish more leaders were paying closer attention to?
To the design of how might I make it better. I feel like we're running in reactive mode, and I get that. I've worked in businesses where we're short on cash and there's consequences coming, or we're trying to prepare for a sale and we need things done, or private equity's hunting and they want the bones scaled out of the business. I've worked in all those scenarios. But yeah, for me, it's really about building, this coalition of the humanity side of the business. Humans are the difference that makes the difference.
And it will be the difference when we're moving forward with AI coming in as fast as it is. It will definitely be the difference. So,
well, prompt engineers,
Yeah.
I mean, the beautiful things about AI is they take those terabytes of data that you or I probably got sitting somewhere in our OneDrive, that if you've been a service provider or an advisor to many, whether they be at a board level or whether you've been a board director and you've accumulated all this knowledge, that knowledge used to sit as almost dormant, fact stuff. But now with the AI and the prompts in a private environment, you can actually harvest that and really help to learn from your learnings and improve. So productivity will get a massive uplift by necessity, but also by design. And we're going to take away a lot of those jobs and functions that none of us like to do.
Yeah.
But again, we've got to design with the human involved, right? So design-led. Really, we have to be design-led.
What are the possibilities or shifts you see in the future of leadership or work that really genuinely excites you, and why?
I'm just loving the leaders that can come in and bring purpose to an organization beyond making money. I grew up in the 80s, so being nice to people and giving to charity was kind of in the marketing department. I'm watching all of that come into the center and being excited about being a corporate and a global citizen that problem solves. And man, we've been in these industries a long time. How do we contribute to the greater good through our products and services, but think of it in the greater good? We've really spent, I think, the last 30 years so focused on this maximization of profit motive that it's really hurt this idea of how do we actually make progress as a society and move forward. Now, I spent a lot of time in research, I spent a lot of time in social enterprise and in not-for-profits where that had never gone away. But we'd kind of divided, oh, you're the profit people and you're the people that think about the planet and the next generation or 7 generations forward. I think for me, my favorite word is and. Yes, and, now these things are coming together.
My final question to you is, if you could embed one leadership quality into every current and future CEO, something you believe will be essential in the next decade, what would that be and why?
Suspend judgment, your ability to suspend judgment so that you can genuinely listen to new information or a different opinion and take it in.
Do you think we're too judgmental at the moment?
I think we don't give ourselves permission, because I think in the structures we have today, we are rewarding the instant answer, or the instant discussion, or I've done that before, hire me, or I'm the best because I know the answers to that. And we don't take a breath and really consider, let me consult a little bit more broadly. I'm watching things that are evolving that are in bubbles. The tech bro bubble, the bubble that, I think has stood around some of the political or climate movements. They're in a bubble. All the climate people are catastrophizing together. But how do we open that up and hear why people want or don't want nuclear energy, or why are people consuming, not recycling, a need to persuade and influence them long enough to hear why. I don't have time. I don't have the luxury for it. Oh, okay. Now I understand the problem I'm solving. It's not education. It's not telling them what to do. It's that I have a very time-poor person for whom this is another psychological thing I'm laboring on top. So I need to make it easier. I need to make the interfaces of how do we make doing the right thing the easiest thing.
What a great way to end our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on Future Fit Leadership. It's been wonderful to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. It's been delightful. And, for me, it's about how do we all do better? And I don't mean that in a fancy, like a Hans Christian Andersen kind of way. I'm a true believer. I've looked at a lot of places around the world, and we have a lot going for us in Australia, and we're clever people, and we can be kind, and we can be creative.
If you like what you've heard, please share, rate and review this podcast, and don't forget to share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. The producer of Future Fit Leadership is Maritza Barone from Guide Your Light Network. If you would like to reach out to me, please DM me on any of my social media platforms. I'm available for speaking at conferences or consulting to your business. Future Fit is created in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives. If you'd like to join the community and receive a free takeaway each week, sign up to the Future Exchange app in my show notes. Thank you for having me in your space. This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.